scripture reading today is from the book of Revelation. The angel then showed me the river of life-giving water, clear as crystal, which issued from the throne of God and of the Lamb and flowed down the middle of the streets. On either side of the river is the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing fruit each month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. There will no longer be any curse. The throne of the Almighty and of the Lamb will be there, and God's subjects will serve faithfully. They will see the Most High face to face and bear God's name on their foreheads. Night will be no more. They will need no light from lamps or the sun, for our God will give them light, and they will reign forever. Ancient text for our consideration.
During Children's Chapel, in the month of December, we have been talking about Advent, and we have been lighting an Advent wreath just like we do in here. And the first Sunday of Advent is hope. And so when I talked to the children about hope, we talked about not just what we hope in our own lives, but what we hope for in the world. And one of them said, well, I hope for war to end, for there to be no more violence. And another of the youngest kids said, well, I hope for no more death and dying. And that's a very tender thing to hear from a young child. And I think from a very young age, we have a sense of the pain of being human and the sense that our world isn't quite, or maybe not at all, like we want it to be. It doesn't feel right to us, or it feels hard. And Advent is a season in which we get in touch with that longing, that sort of sense that things aren't right, the pain of existence, and also this longing and this hope for something much better. So each week in December, we've been looking at either a Christmas carol or an Advent hymn that sort of embodies these themes of Advent, this sort of twin longing and despair. And today we're going to sing O Come, Emmanuel, which is one of my favorite, I think Jim's favorite too. And it's sung in a minor key, which also feels very much like the spirit of this season. And some of the words in that song, O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night and death's dark shadows put to flight. Bind all peoples in one heart and mind, bid envy strive and discord cease. Free from us all hate and tyranny, from depths of fear your people relieve. And I think perhaps even more of us this year feel these words, a sense of alienation from the culture and society around us. Maybe we feel the shadow of death close at hand, or feel that grief over the conflicts raging all across the world. The way that tyranny and hate have arisen from fear. And I think if we let ourselves, we feel that longing for a better world, for that world repaired, made whole. So I've been wrestling for a while with trying to develop more connection, more empathy, more compassion for those who have a very different view of the world and reality than I do, because I found that whether it's in church or among friends and family, I pretty much travel in circles where people think very much like I do. And I have felt that struggle acutely since early November. And so I've tried to sit with that, and this is a journey that's going to continue. But something that came to me recently was just connecting with that longing that everyone has for a better world, for peace, and that sense that things aren't right. And We might not agree with everyone's, kind of pinpointing what is it that's wrong in the world. The sources of that feeling vary. It might be struggling to make ends meet. It might be a cognitive dissonance that's been caused by social norms shifting and trying to kind of struggle through your identity and place in the world when it feels very different than the way you grew up. It might be dread about the climate crisis that is already here, or anger and grief over the broad refusal to really look at our history and hold it and be honest about slavery and racism and misogyny and all of the various forms of hate that have been woven into this country from the very beginning. Whatever that causes, I think this feeling of anomie or sort of existential dread, this longing for something better, is something that all of us feel. And like I said, we might pinpoint different causes of that feeling. And I think we do differ on our vision of the world that is healed and whole and feels right, and differ also on how we think we ought to get there. And there are those who come along peddling quick fixes, easy solutions, perfect outcomes, sort of a hearkening back to an idealized time when things were great for some people but not most people. Charlatans who understand how to wield power, the power of people's pain and longing, usually for their own ends. There have always been snake oil salesmen, right? Wielding swords and sorcery and sleight of hand, hawking a particular vision of the world which is only possible through coercion and force and trickery. So any good dystopian novel reveals the methods, right? A perfect world achieved at a cost, typically through some form of violence. And I think our vision of the world, that which we kind of hold as the world made whole, that matters, and how we think we get there matters. So this Sunday in Advent and this moment in our history felt like a really good time for an apocalyptic text. So the Revelation to John. And there are two kind of main schools of thought or approaches to apocalyptic texts like this one. Some see them as talking about the future, or prophecy of something that's going to happen. Sometimes people want to further that along. And then there is a way of seeing that as something that is really trying to reveal something kind of true at the core of the time in which it was written, like a dystopian novel. And I feel like this is a truer reading of the text. What most of Revelation is about is really about pulling the layers back on the Roman Empire and all of the different effects that was having on Judaism, early Christianity. And it's just the very last piece of Revelation that sort of talks about a vision of a world made whole. And that's what I want to focus on today. And again, there is the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. On either side of the river is the tree of life, with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. Nothing accursed will be found there anymore. So this really short beginning of Revelation 22 is rich with symbolism. And there are three main pieces of that symbol that I want to look at. The river of water flowing from the throne, the fruit and the leaves of the tree, and the tree of life that reaches both sides of the river. So I'll start with the tree of life that reaches both sides of the river. I think early this fall, Patrick and I signed up for a citizen forester class, and that is a thing that's now happening in Pflugerville where you can learn about trees and help when they need help to trim and plant and care for trees and count trees in the city. If you know about Pflugerville, you know that forestry starts with a P. I didn't create that. And I learned a lot about trees that I didn't know. I typically had this vision of a tree as sort of a mirror, like the tree grows up and the tree grows down, and it's kind of a mirror image. But that's not how trees grow. When they are beginning, they put a root sort of laterally down to tap into the water, and then that dies back, and the roots grow out laterally. They grow out horizontally. And I think you see that in this vision of a tree that is on both sides, reaches both sides of the river. It's a bridge. And this speaks to me of a vision of how we grow and relate to one another. Rather than seeing ourselves as the trunk of the tree, which extends out, what if we saw ourselves as the roots that extended out laterally, sort of intertwining and connecting with one another, forming a network of mutuality without verticality, or what I would call hierarchy. This growing out of the roots enables all of us to reach up and out toward the light. We've created and we perpetuate a lot of hierarchies in our society, right? We have the rich and the poor, the highly educated and the illiterate, the superior and the subordinate, the elite and the masses, the housed and the unhoused. And even when we work against these hierarchies in many different ways in our lives, they can still be pretty deeply embedded within us. It's really hard to break out of this mindset of seeing relationships vertically. And I think about work that we do with the hungry, the poor, the needy, the homeless, and I wonder how we're thinking about ourselves in relationship to them. Are we serving them? Who are they? Do we see them as beneficiaries of our goodwill? And all of this that we do is a good thing. But I wonder about how we relate to people. Do we see ourselves in them? And not the kind of there, but the grace of God, there go I kind of way. But do we see ourselves in them? Could we be friends with them? Do we see them as family? Can they see themselves reflected in us? Are they part of our family? Are there still more vertical ways that we see these relationships? Today we're going to sing O Come, Emmanuel. And Emmanuel is, the word means God with us. And this Christmas story tells about God being born in this very humble fashion as an infant child to a teenage mother of little economic means and low status in society. So it's this sort of very dramatic story about God entering into the human experience in a modest way and collapsing that vertical distance and upending all of these hierarchies that we've created. I love it. This image of a tree of life with roots spreading on both sides of the river speaks to me a vision of a world where every person matters, is valued, appreciated, where every person's gifts work for the good of the whole, those with PhDs and those with an 8th grade education, those who work in a lab, those who work in a field, those who sing with their voices and sign with their hands, the sacred worth of every single person celebrated. Don't we long for that? So in addition to the roots, it talks about 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month, and the leaves of the tree being for the healing of the nations. So this is an image of abundance, of continually producing fruit, of continually giving life. And this tree of life is an archetype, right? It's very widespread in our world and throughout time. So just go home and Google, and you'll come up with all of these beautiful, varied images of trees of life in different religions and cultures, and they have different cosmologies, but they're all kind of pointing to this, this connection to nature and to life abundant. And so I imagine if we were walking around this tree of life, talked about in Revelation, that each little bit we would look at this tree, and as we walk around, we would see a different tree, one of these different world trees. We would see it from a different angle, and we would see all of this beautiful culture and religion all in this one life-giving tree. And there are multiple ways to interpret all of these 12 different fruits, right? It could be fruit of the Spirit, which is talked about in Galatians. But I also see in this representation of all these different ways of being in the world, of understanding our world, of how to live, of food and art and culture and religion, of philosophy and science and nature-centered ways of seeing, those ways which see spirit everywhere. And the number 12, biblically, represents a sense of wholeness and completeness. So in this tree, that is many trees perhaps in one tree, that is abundant in diversity, there is a sense of wholeness. And from this tree, we get whatever is needed for the healing of everybody. Like everyone's good gifts for the whole, for everyone. It's not an American tree. It's the tree of life for every human being, everywhere. And this is a vision of a world of mutuality and respect and celebration and value. It's colorful, it's rich. There's no form of violence or oppression or curse found there. And I love this vision. The final piece of the symbol talks about the river of the water of life flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb. So what is this throne of God and the Lamb? What I think this image is trying to convey is that I think it's talking about the nature of power that shapes the world, the nature of that sort of creative, generative, restorative force. You have God, and you have the Lamb. And God on the throne is an image of authority and strength and justice. And the Lamb, which also represents Jesus, is representing a different kind of power, a way of humility and mercy and yielding. And these two ways of power are together on this throne, and they're bound together. It's not love without justice. It's not all strength and force. It's the joining of both of these ways of shaping. And this world-shaping power that flows out clear as crystal is a power that gives life as it goes. If it's not giving life, it's not the tree of life. So this is the kind of power, the way of world shaping that's talked about in this vision. A world of peace where everyone and everything is made whole, a world that's flowing in harmony with nature. It's not about coercion and force and placing on others a way of seeing the world. It's different than that. If you've walked down the children's hall recently, you'll see at the end of the hall there is a tree, and it's got leaves on its branches and birds in the branches. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the floor is blue. And on the wall, there is wallpaper that emulates waves. Sound familiar? It's the tree of life, right here. Another representation of this tree of life. It's a vision of the world made whole that we can carry and nurture within us like a seed. Every time we see each person as a member of our one human family, see ourselves in a rooted network of mutuality, when we flatten the distance between ourselves and others and reach out sideways, when we cast aside any form of exceptionalism or superiority, when we flatten that distance just like Emmanuel, God with us. This is a vision that we can hold up and test our own thoughts and ideas and actions against. It's something that can grow in us and be born through us into the world. In the midst of a world that contains strife and conflict and the shadow of death, still there is this tree of life, and it gives life, and it is life. When we sing O come, Emmanuel, we are singing for this way of power, this way of shaping the world, for this tree of life to grow into its fullness. We sing with longing that no longer would we live in exile, in the shadow of death or in strife or in fear, but that we would be home together, that all would be healed, that all would be fed, that all would dwell in the light together. In one of my most favorite books, a little novella called Song for the Wild-Built, Becky Chambers says that the world is less a puzzle to be solved than a song to be sung. So on this third Sunday of Advent, let us sing together for this world made whole. These are my reflections and interpretations, and I invite you now to your own reflections and interpretations.